So this is the second in our series. We started last month talking about flexing your web muscles with QuarkXPress. Last time we talked about how to build a simple website, basically the 10-minute website. That blog, webinar recording, and the tutorial video are all now available. So you can go back and reference those from quark.com. The YouTube channel link is at the bottom of the website. And the blog, of course, you can access under the About navigation section. And we will email everyone after today's session as well to provide all of the necessary links. So today we're talking about creating websites to ensure that, the design integrity is maintained. Let me also just clarify before we get started that we know that there are some technical issues when playing video over Zoom. Unfortunately, the quality degrades, but that's why we've got the tutorials, which are high quality video. And again, those links will be posted right after the session. We'll email you those links tomorrow. So you will be able to get clear audio and video to show you exactly what Martin is talking about today. And speaking of Martin, he is again our guest speaker, Martin Turner, a PR branding and QuarkXPress expert. So I am going to turn it over to him in just a minute. Let me just say that, last time it was great because we had so many questions. Please, we want to make this session, interactive. So we're going to spend about probably, 20 to 30 minutes explaining the concept, teeing it up, and then we do want to open it up for questions. So please use the chat or the Q&A feature to send those to us, and we will hopefully have a really fun interactive dialogue. The last thing I'll say is that we are doing one more session on June 2nd, and that is going to focus on using QuarkXPress to help build enterprise websites. So Martin, I am going to turn it over to you now, and thanks again for being with us.
Well, thank you very much, Bunny. It's great to be here again. So this time we're going to be doing design-led websites. Now, we're not going to do all the things again we did last time, otherwise it would just take twice as long. But you can watch this one and then watch last time's afterwards. You can watch them out of order, but if you don't watch last time's at all, you will miss some key concepts. Well, let me just introduce it for a second. So we're going to talk about design-led websites. This is where we're not taking a template, we're going to work from the ground up. Now, with any kind of design, I would always recommend do a thumbnail first on paper. Otherwise, you're going to get lost. But you have your assets and branding ready when you're going to start on this. This is not a voyage of discovery. It means you need to know what you want to do and have the things to do it with. Secondly, you want to match what you have, same look and feel. So last time we looked at using supplied templates, and they may go all the distance you need to go, but sometimes that's not enough. You need to make it much more like what you have. This is going to be using blocks and elements rather than templates. It's still using Flex. Flex still uses blocks, so we need to understand that. It's not a complete free-for-all. If you want a free-for-all, then use Fixed. We're going to talk about that more next time. But Fixed gives you the Rolls-Royce of websites, but you've got to create a separate layout for every size or shape of device that's going to access it. So Rolls-Royce quality, Rolls-Royce price in terms of how much work you've got to put in. But this is going to give us interactivity and animation based on your graphics. And it uses the familiar Quark tools. When you start actually using bespoke or specialist website design stuff, you realize just how much work Quark does for you, even in things like being able to crop images. There's so many web tools that can't crop images. Why not? Because they expect you to have decided that before you imported the graphics. Well, we don't always work that way. So what I'm going to do now is play you a pre-prepared, or as we say, prepared video of doing a design-led website. Now, I'm not going to claim this is going to win any awards. I created this specifically for this, but I hope it's going to show you how we can go about it. I'm not going to show you in this video how to upload your files to the web. We did that last time. I'm not going to show you how to do links. We did that last time. I'm not going to show you how to do rollovers. We did that last time. And if you're completely at sea about Flex, what it is, what it does, that was last time. Watch that, but watch this now, because a lot of the things you'll just pick up. So here we go. File, new, project, and I'm going to go again to digital. I'm going to go to Flex again. I'm going to put in my project layout name, because you can't change the name afterwards with a Flex layout. You can have as many layouts as you want, but you can't change the names afterwards. So I'm going to change that. The grid is going to be fine. The maximum width, that's the width of an HD TV. So that's a good max to have. And the other options are fine. Okay, it's going to create that. And we'll see it's going to come up with the template browser from last time, but I don't want that. This time I want to have the Flex page, the Flex layout blocks, and I want to have the Flex object browser. Always have the object browser on when you're using Flex. Now, it is possible to create containers really from scratch like that, or indeed to just take any object and right click or control click, create Flex, and you'll see that it's now made a box inside a container. In Flex, everything must be in a container, otherwise Flex doesn't know what to do with it. It will behave strangely when it appears in the HTML website. But actually, in most cases, it's better to use these blocks. Now, these are not templates in the same way. They are literally just blocks of code, which Quark has pre-populated for you in a way to make it easy to use. So let's drag that across, and this doesn't have any graphics or anything in there. What it's got is it has the root container. You get a little breadcrumb over here. And then it's got the container, the row and column. Let's look at that for a second on the object browser. Root container, container, row, column. You'll see that all of these are part of the root container. If they're not part of that root container, it will start to go wrong when it's in use. The hierarchy is always container, row, column, and then things are in the column. They can also be directly in the container, but you can't have a row in a column or a container in a row. Containers can contain other containers. Now that might be a bit confusing, so let's start doing some things to it. Well, we're going to skip sections for a moment because this has already got these sections in there. In fact, if I was building really from scratch, then I would put sections in right now, but I'm not going to do that yet. Instead, what I'm going to do is go to Basic, and I'm going to put some text in there. Now, this is where my title is going to go. This has no padding or anything, and if we go to Flex, we'll see here where the padding goes that there's nothing there. Now I can increase that to maybe 15, which would be quite a good number, but rather than having to do that, let's just delete that for a second. Quark's already prepared one with text padded, so I'm going to put that in there. Now I'm going to put more text in there. And I'm also going to put a picture in there. Normally, I'd always say to people, sketch out a thumbnail sketch on paper before you start working on your website, because otherwise you'll get hopelessly lost. Now, I actually previously tried this website on an Intel Mac running Mojave. Right now I'm running an M1 Max Mac on Monterey, but I just wanted to make sure it works on both. So I've already tried this out. Now, before I go any further, I want to go back to my root container, because as well as containing other things, containers can also have pictures. So File, Import, And I've just prepared some graphics here. Space background. This is from a book called Winds of Space. It's a science fiction novel, and so obviously space is going to be the right thing. If I go to picture box, you'll see all of your regular picture things. But if I go to container, then you'll see background fill. And I can do this in various ways. Fill's going to be fine for me. But if I put enable parallax effect on, then the stars will stay where they are while I scroll. That can be a great effect for many things. In the end, I'll probably turn it off for this one, but we'll see it in a minute. You can't do that if you set the background in the export. So last week we noticed by the export that we could set the background, but you won't see it on the page. And if my text is white, it will be very unhelpful. And also you can't put the parallax effect on. Now, let's put my title in there, and that's my headline. Now, as you can see, this is currently black. So let's go to Window, and because all of our text is going to be white, otherwise it'll make no sense. So we're going to go to Style Sheet, and we're going to just make that text white. And I don't want Helvetica, it's not really very science fictiony. I'm going to go with a variable font which I've pre-prepared called Amstelvár. Here it is. So, and again we want to make that bigger. Now I'm going to expand this, and you'll see that it will actually change the box size to suit. So probably that's a little bit too much. Now again, we've got our Amstelvár there, so I maybe want to make that 18 points, I think, because of the way websites respond to things. So again, I've got a little bit of text here. This is my teaser text for the website, and that goes in there. Let's make that just a little bit bigger. Here we go. Okay, and now I want a picture, and I'm going to put this space shuttle in, rather nifty one. Now this is a PNG file, and a PNG file, unlike a JPEG, can have transparency, which, as we're going to see in a moment when I turn off the white background, is going to work very well with that space background. Now, I probably don't really want to occupy as much of my precious screen space with it like that, so I'm going to, oops, didn't want to do that. I'm going to, let's take away that rotation there. I'm going to just reduce that. Again, I'll reduce the text size a little bit to suit with that. So what do I want to do next? Well, I'm actually going to, before we go any further, just put a bit of animation on there. So Window, HTML5, and I'm going to animate this space shuttle, science fiction shuttle, not a real one. I'll double click together on the picture itself. I'm going to do animation, and I'm going to say we're going to rotate it clockwise for a duration of 360 seconds. We're going to loop it, and we're going to do that as 360-degree rotation. So it's going to go right the way around. And for this text here, I'm going to do, again, animation, and I'm going to fade in 30 seconds duration. But I'm also going to just roll that angle a little bit as it moves out and scale it down to 0, and you'll see that happening when we get there. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, again, before I go any further, I want to set Control click or right click on a PC. I'm going to do the export options, and this sets the alt text, it's a tag which is required in HTML5 for it to be compliant. So it's important to do that. Now let's come back down to our sections, and I want a section which has got 3 columns because when you minimize the size of the screen, then the columns will stack up in 3s, which is what I kind of want. And again, I'm going back to basic here. We could use some of these more fancy components. In fact, we will here. We're going to do 3 threes. And I'm just going to put some people's heads in those. Again, you'd want to do the alt tags for those. We'll just do one of those in a minute. I'm not going to do all of these as it'll be far too tedious, but these are just some of the characters in the story, and we actually would have 9 of them because apparently stories sell better if there are more characters. You wouldn't believe it. So again, we're going to do control click or right click, and we're going to go to actually no, we're going to actually be come back to here, control click, export options, and this is the name of the principal character. Now he's got a funny Swedish letter there. That should be okay, but again, you want to check that. With websites, assume that stuff doesn't work unless you check that it does. So check that it's actually working for your particular application, because it may very well may not. Now, last week somebody asked, is it possible to do slideshows? Well, let's do one. So I'm going to put again a picture in there. Where's my picture? Here it is. No padding or anything. And I'm going to just go back to that HTML5, and I'm going to put my slideshow in. Now, where am I getting them from? Add slides from picture files. So I've already got these ready, and off it goes. So again, I want to make background none, otherwise it makes no sense. And I can just click through those and see how they appear. So clearly, I'm going to want that a little bit bigger. To fill the screen nicely, bit of a spaceship there, make that a little bit bigger as well, a bit of a space explosion, which I don't want to show everything, you've got to leave something to the imagination, and a smaller explosion. Well, I'm going to do that like that, so they follow in that way. And we can do this various things for this, but I'm going to have fade rather than slide, so they just kind of fade in. I'll allow interaction, I could turn that off, and I'll also allow full screen. So what have we got here? We could do much more, but let's have a look at it right now, because I think you're beginning to get the sense of a bespoke website rather than something which looks like it's been built with tables. Now, okay, my text, we can see here is my text is going to fade in and then go white and then fade out again as it disappears, and that's to do with just the way I've set this up. You'll again see that as I reduce the size of it, those faces will stack up in groups of 3, and eventually it'll break it down. But that's quite a nice effect. And then again, you see my slideshow here is just rolling away, and it's going to go back to that galactic map in a second. Of course, it's not the real galaxy, it's a science fiction galaxy. And then we're going to go on to that spaceship, which is doing what spaceships do. There it is, in all its glory. And again, if I reduce the size of that, now you'll see it's got its own star background. And this parallax effect, which I talked about, it means the stars stay where they were as I change it. Now, actually, it doesn't really look quite as good as I thought it might. So I'm going to just go back to the Quark file, and we'll just go back to that root container, and we will very simply turn off the parallax effect. We will preview again. You will find that you're doing a lot of previewing when you're constructing a website, because everything on a website which hasn't been checked to work, you can assume doesn't work. So now the stars don't move, which is a little bit better, but that out of control spaceship just rotating around just seems a bit more realistic. And if you can't read the text, it says, "Mayday, Mayday, I'm drifting in space, power is gone, air is low, I'm cold and I'm alone, Mayday, Mayday, oxygen running out. If this signal arrives too late, tell everyone I love them. Mayday, mayday. And again, we just want to check on that. We'll set it to loop so it just keeps coming back like a voice from the void. We can keep on adding more sections onto the bottom of this page, add as many sections as you want, with all kinds of other things, planets, whatever, and that page will just scroll down and down and down. But when you come to view it, it will only ever have as much page as you've specified. So it won't go off the bottom into other things and show that you haven't finished it. So again, that text is coming up there, it fades in, it fades out again. It's a teaser. If you want to give good information, then don't do effect. One thing I would say is that making it work is really important. Websites are about information. This was a bit fussier and fancier because of the subject matter, but if there's a choice between doing an animation or not doing it, your tendency will be, let's do it. But in most cases, the website will be better as flat text. People generally do not have time for your animation. I'm just going to do one more refinement, which is I'm just going to fade in that that title just to refine it a little bit further, and then we're going to stop. So again, preview, and there it goes. And then this other text just starts fading in. It's hard to read. Mayday, I'm drifting in space. And you see that ship's out of control there. And already these are changing. A lot of things going on there. For most websites, I wouldn't want to be that fussy, but hopefully that gives you some pictures of what you can do. Now, just to refresh us, everything must be in, at least in the root container, it will be in containers. If you use these, then you can clearly make them work easily. But if you're going to create stuff from scratch and you convert that into Flex, it will not be in the right container to begin with. But if you just cut that and go back to our root container here, you can paste that in. It will appear in the right place, doing what it's doing. And there we have it. Well, okay. I hope that was kind of comprehensible. The key takeaways is that you can create containers using the container tool, and that's a good way of doing it. You can turn other things into Flex objects, but in most cases it's going to be better to work with blocks because that's the structure that Flex actually uses itself, and ultimately you'll put everything in there. Everything has got to be in that root container. And if you're doing something and it just goes wrong, it keeps not doing what you're expecting, stuff looks great in one screen, but then when you slide it, change the orientation, change the size, it just looks weird, chances are that something is not inside that root container. For the rest, I think we should go over to questions at this point. What do you think, Bunny?
Okay, we will open the floor to questions. So please use the chat function or go to the Q&A. This is your chance to ask Martin about building websites using the Flex technology. Was that information helpful? Would you have rather seen something else? Please provide that feedback. Okay, we've got a couple of questions coming in. Martin, how do you start with an HTML document that you already have so you can edit them?
You can import HTML into QuarkXPress, but that's really for importing text. So as with almost any document which a client has sent you or which you've got from some other system, usually the easiest way is to get it as a PDF and convert the PDF to Quark native objects. So yeah, just like you do with anything, you can do the same thing with an IDML file, or take a picture of it, put it on the page, and draw your boxes over it and gradually replace things. And you can do that really quickly. It's like tracing on a light box, for those who remember doing that in the old days. But it seems like, oh, I'm doing all the work again. Actually, you're not. You can also use graphics which are already there. You can slice them by just using Quark's own picture box function. You haven't got to do slices like you do with other web software. But really, if you've got an HTML document and you want to make it in Quark, use that as your guide, like your thumbnail, but remake it. And actually, we're going to talk about this next time. When you're doing a big web project, they're going to do exactly the same thing to your Quark prepared example. They will use it as their model, their example, but they will write all their own code in complicated things like PHP.
Okay, we had a shy group at first, but now the questions are coming in. Are you ready, Martin?
I am.
All right. For fonts to look best in these builds, should I stick with variable fonts, open source, Google? How do I figure out the licensing so it will show up correctly?
To use a font, you need to have a license which allows you to use it on the web. So if you've got fonts that you've had for like 30 years, then almost certainly the license allows you to do pretty much anything with it. And it's only really since about 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago for some fonts, that licenses have started saying for desktop use only or for web use only. But technically and legally, if your font is only licensed for desktop, you've got to separately license it for the web. Now that is annoying, and that will often then lead me to choose a different font. Although if it's a branded font, if it's part of your brand, you just got to go with that. That's part of the cost of doing business. All Google fonts are, you can use them for anything. They are open source, well, not open source, but they are freely available to use. So that's not a problem for licensing. But if you click on the information for your font, that's Command I on a Mac, I'm not sure what it does on a PC, it'll tell you what the license requirements are. And in the same way that you really shouldn't go around the web downloading free fonts and then forgetting where you got them from, keep a track of your licenses, but those licenses should be in the information. If there is no license information there, steer clear. Now, back to variable fonts. Quark doesn't do variable fonts yet, so if you want to use them, you've got to create the weights in a separate application. I like the idea of variable fonts, but you really do not need fonts varying on the web. It's a technology which exists. Nobody's yet found a use for it in terms of making websites look really good. So for now, pick the right size, and you can specify how Flex responds to changing the size. And there's all kinds of refinements which we didn't go into. But pick the font at the size you want, and then let Flex do the rest of the work.
Okay, great. Next question. Is it possible to design a fixed height but flexible width?
No. Not using Flex. You can do that using fixed. So the way Flex works is it trades size at the side for height. Now, you can tweak everything to the point that it effectively behaves in that way, but I think that'd be quite a frustrating thing to do. So if you want to have a fixed height, then create a fixed layout and just create 4 or 5 different layouts for computer screen, HDTV, a lot of people watching websites on smart TVs now, for iPhone and for iPad or other device. You can have the content linking to each other so the content can follow it. So if you make a change in one, it'll change all of them. It does take longer than Flex, but it doesn't take vastly longer, and then you can actually set it to be exactly what you want.
Okay, next question. Is the Flex layer in Quark native, or do I need to purchase it separately?
It's part of QuarkXPress. It's built in, and it will work out of the box.
Okay, couple of more questions here I need to sort through here. I have a large website that I want to convert to Quark. Is that possible?
You can't do a direct conversion, and having done those kinds of projects in the past, you probably don't want to. Having been faced with a 100-page website for an organization I worked for, and introducing a content management system, and they said, "Yeah, but you've got to introduce all of our existing pages." But then when we actually looked at the existing pages, they were mostly out of date. The graphics were all a bit different. If you're going to do it from scratch. And if you've got a large website, then you might want to consider creating the template in QuarkXPress, but then putting it into something like WordPress or Concrete 5 or whatever. I wouldn't use Quark directly to manage a big website, especially not if you want to have 25 people updating content. If you've got the content already and you can just paste it in, you can make this pretty quickly. The big issue with websites, much more than with printed text, is updating them, because people expect websites to be up to date. So Quark is fantastic for generating high quality websites quickly, and for allowing you to do it design-led rather than led by what your web software allows you to do, which is massively frustrating, and everything ends up looking like everything else. But if you want to move to a big project, we're going to talk about this next time, then I would use QuarkXPress as an intermediate step where you then are showing the final designer how to do it. Or if you want to do it yourself, using Quark to produce a template, then converting that template by other tools such as PineGrow into WordPress, or using Concrete 5's own tools into Concrete 5.
Okay. Martin, last time you said Flex was not necessarily the greatest for designing pages because elements would move around and ruin the design.
Yep.
Do you need to clarify anything around that?
If how the page looks is really important to you, then you will not know how it's going to look on every device unless you actually try it on every single device. So let me just go back to that website for a second. So this is a slightly later version of it. But as I move that around, if I'm happy for that, if you know, if that looks great to you, it's different sizes, then that's great. But if you're an art publisher and it's essential that everything is in exactly the right proportions and things don't go astray no matter what they're on, then at that point you should be thinking of doing fixed with different layouts, and then it will choose between different layouts. There's only really 5 or 6 you need to do. Everything else will look pretty much right. And in that way, you get complete control. In Flex, you lose control, and it's actually easier to make a fixed website that you don't have to think about root containers and things like that. It's just that you've got to make it 5 or 6 times. The Quark's tools do allow you to do that more quicker than you might. But with Flex, you are trading flexibility for control.
Next question. How complex is the actual HTML code? And what level of knowledge is required by someone who might have to troubleshoot it if they're not using QXP? Would QXP then recognize the changes made in the manual code?
You can have a box in QuarkXPress, which is other code. So let me just go there and I'll show it to you. So let me just get my HTML browser. Where's it gone? Okay. So HTML5, this is going to be a bit small because it's the screen's native resolution. And you can let's just create a new thing to make this obvious. And custom HTML. And you can, if someone's written some bespoke code for you, then you can paste it in there. And that will do whatever they specified. But Quark will not re-import HTML. If somebody rewrites your code, at that point they're kind of on their own. You should not need to. It doesn't need debugging. It actually works. And if so someone sent me an invitation which I didn't want. If it's not working, then you need to look and correct what's happening in QuarkXPress, which is most often going to be things are not in the right container. The code, let me just see if I can call this code up for you. The code is like any other HTML5 code. I mean, it's easy if you understand HTML5 code, but there's a lot of it. You've got JavaScript, all kinds of things happening here. So let's just go back to, this is the debugging screen from Apple's preview. And you can see how these animations work. You could adjust these animations in CSS. They're all CSS transitions. There's no funny code here. It's not that Quark has done weird things and they rely on proprietary extensions. They don't. It all works perfectly well on regular browsers. But here is the page code. You're not able to read it, but as you can see, there's a lot of it because that's how HTML5 works. Everything is declared in CSS and various other ways. And when you then get down to the actual page, which is here, I don't know if you can really see that, then you get body style equals margin 0% and so on. They're all absolutely standard, and it lays it out quite nicely. So it's going to be easy to debug, but you will not be able to bring that back into QuarkXPress. If you want to fix it in Quark, fix it in Quark. If you're using Quark to create a template, then at that point you're handing it over. This is important with anything with the web, that you hand over in phases. So it's actually possible to host your website from your own computer. You could literally take this and send out the IP address and people could look at it on your computer. And back in the early days of the web, people really did this. But the result will then be that if 50 people start looking, it will start crashing your computer. You have to hand it over to what's called a LAMP server, in most cases, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, although there are other arrangements available. And that's what your web host does. So if you're handing it over to the guy who does code, you're handing it over. And that guy's later going to hand it over to the LAMP server, and they might even hand it over to Cloudflare or Amazon cloud services to serve that beyond. And it's transparent to you. You don't need to know anything more. But you do have to hand things over in stages. And once you've handed it over, you can send it again. You can easily make your corrections in QuarkXPress. And then those guys know what to do. They can probably just do a fine change. But you can't go back down the chain.
Okay. Next question. This may not be the exact terminology, but is there a way to link or load external CSS styles, say from a company's main website, into the style sheets so the Flex site matches the styles, or do I need to rebuild styles in Quark?
You need to rebuild the styles in Quark. Although you can put HTML5 in, it doesn't mean that Quark is going to display it in the way that your web browser is going to do it. So if you've got CSS, then you should be able to look and see what it says. What's the font, what's the size, what's the padding, and you can put all those things in QuarkXPress. But although you can put HTML5 code and you can put anything in it, can include CSS styles for that block of text, or whatever it is, and in fact you could have the entire page just doing that, you're losing the power of Quark at this point. The power of Quark is that you can easily manage structured style sheets in a much more powerful way even than CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets, where they read each other like Quark does. That was a massive advance on the old style sheets, for those who remember the web from years ago. But compared to Quark's styles and item styles and things, it's actually quite primitive. So the power of QuarkXPress is it uses your familiar tools and then you kind of push it forward. If you've got something which has already been prepared, just check what size it is, what the font is, what the color is, put that straight in.
Okay. As a follow-on, Mark wants to know if we can append style sheets and colors, etc., from a print layout into a flex layout.
Yes, you can. You can use, in fact, you can just actually just paste them in, copy and paste. And I do that quite a lot. So I've got one document where, I'm just going to see if I can find this, where we designed all of the print and the web at the same time. And we had, in different layouts on QuarkXPress, all of the same files working together. And when we updated the font for one of them, it even updated the font for, hang on, I'm trying to open that in Safari, that's why it's not working. Okay, it even updated the fonts for both the print and the web. And again, when we changed content, so we had linked content, it did that as well. So again, let me just quickly find this and I'll try to show it to you. This is an art project based around Jan van Eyck's famous Lamberthods, which is in St. Barth's Cathedral in the city of Ghent. Okay, here we come. And I think we might have shown this before at some point. And here you've got, that is the actual website. And if we look at the style sheets, we've got some separation of web and print, but by and large, things are copied across, and it does business cards, there's a logo there, special invitation, and so on. And probably if I was doing it again, I wouldn't have all the things in the same documents, different layouts, because it ends up takes a long time to save it, because these graphics are huge. Some of these graphics are 50 gigabytes in size, because they had to be printed at I think 10 feet by 10 feet. But definitely one of the real advantages is you can mix the print content and the web content. And actually, just look at some of this content here. So you've got shared content. I don't know if you can quite see this, if it's too small on the screen. I know Zoom's compressing it heavily, but we've got all the contact details and everything. So when we change them on the website, it changes them on all the print as well.
One more question from Mark around accessibility, especially keyboard navigation and screen readers. Is there a palette that controls read order, artifacting, alt text, tab order, etc.?
The alt text and the artifacting is in export options. Read order you can specify in the way you put the content together. So if you use that content browser, let me just go back there again. Let's go back to the Flex Object Browser. That actually sets out in what order things happen, and you can change that. If you create if you create a new object, let's wait for that to take a few moments to start a Flex document. Then let's get rid of that. If we say we're going to have these three things and we're going to give them Let's have our measurements palette back. Where's that gone? I want that. Okay, so I'm going to give those a little bit of a border so we can see them. If you now create, so I'm going to control click, right click on a PC, create flex, and it will do it in the order which I specify. So if I specify horizontal, it'll do that, vertical, do that, let's try that. And now these boxes, it's actually moved them, so that wasn't quite what I wanted, but these boxes will then operate in that order. And the same thing with if you create containers and containers and containers, put things inside each other, the order you put them in is the order in which they will operate. Let's paste that there, yeah.
Is it possible to directly edit the HTML files if needed? And could you show an example of the output file structure?
Let's have a look. So, okay, what have we got? Okay, we're just going to export this right now. And export as HTML5. I'm going to put that on the desktop. Export. Off we go. No, I don't want to do that. It will actually overwrite things. I don't want to just start putting stuff on, but I'll do that again. Export as HTML5. I'm going to make a new folder called Untitled Folder 2, one of the great names in folder design, and export that. I'm going to collect the fonts, that's okay. It's going to take a moment or so to do this. Okay, and that's done. So let's go to that desktop and we'll go to Untitled Folder 2. And so the structure, into the growth structure, is you've got page1.html. Now that would actually need to be called index.html, otherwise the browser won't find it. And then inside this assets window, so my screen's probably way too small, but you can see we've got all these different graphics which are in use. And then you've got your CSS, and if we open that, we're just going to open that in BB Edit. For those who know what BB Edit is, we'll do text display set soft wrap, otherwise we won't see anything. And that's the CSS styles set out correctly. Then you've got various bits and pieces, and then we have the fonts, which again are set out in their own folder. So that was common.css, and styles.css is a little bit different. So if you're a programmer and used to using Flex, then that will all be quite apparent to you. For a non-programmer, the styles.css does make some level of sense, but once you get into common.css, which is also cascading style sheets, this is quite complicated stuff, and this is what allows the page HTML, which again we'll just drag that to BB Edit so we can read it rather than load it, enables it to be quite simple. Okay, it's long, and that's just normal these days because it's declaring everything beforehand. But you can see that's been laid out with a degree of willingness to help the person debugging it. So that's the output, that's what you get. But what the user, of course, hopefully gets is an experience, not some code.
Are there any plugins to import Dreamweaver code into Quark, or is it still better, as you've suggested, to rebuild and edit an existing site by converting PDF to native objects in Quark?
You can, if you've got snippets of code in Dreamweaver which do particular jobs, then that's what the HTML5 code function is for. So let's say you've got or you got it from somewhere else, it doesn't got to be even yours. You've got a hamburger menu from somewhere, someone else got that last time. And let's go there. I've got a box here, you can see a little bit. Click on custom HTML. You can post any HTML from Dreamweaver or anywhere in there, and it will then operate that. So you can put a contact form in, if you've got a back-end contact form. In fact, if you've got an existing extensive back-end system, perhaps driven on Drupal or something, and you haven't got time to rebuild it, you just want a fresh face, you can create a landing page in Quark, which then just uses all the bits of code from Drupal, and they all appear on the page as if they're native to that page, but actually it's going straight back into that Drupal website. And if you write PHP, you can have PHP things happening on the page as you go. So if you've got snippets in Dreamweaver, you can definitely use those. But if you want to do a whole website, then remake it in Quark. It would be far easier than trying to debug Dreamweaver stuff.
Okay. Thank you. Next couple of questions. Can QuarkXPress convert print images to optimized web images? For example, a TIFF to a JPEG.
QuarkXPress can do that. That's actually not a flex function. Let me just get onto here. We can look at this space shuttle. And I'm going to go to image editing. And if you do, can you see my mouse there? It's a little bit small, I think, on the screen. Just going to put that over there. So if you click on the export box, you can change that to a different, TIFF, JPEG, PNG, and PDF. So you can make the changes. When Quark receives a file like a TIFF file, it will itself convert it to a web-compatible file when you export for web. But here is a caveat. Because of the way Flex works, it will export up to whatever size you specify. So in your export options, export as HTML5, go to my options here, and you'll see pictures, default resolution, maximum resolution, 144 I'm missing here, and then maximum dimension 2048. Now, that's a big maximum dimension. You're going to get some quite big files for that. So that's not going to optimize it for people using mobile data on small devices. You might want to make that smaller. Clearly, it's not going to export at a higher quality than you brought it in. But if you're finding the files are big, you'll want to make that export option less because Flex likes things to be as big as possible so it can stretch them. If there's no problem about the file size, it's not an issue. But you can export yourself files to PNG, TIFF, JPEG from Quark using the image edit function. When Quark does its export for the web, it converts them to web-friendly formats, but using Flex, it will make quite big pictures if you have them, because it thinks you want to use that quality. So if you want to reduce the total size in the export options, reduce the maximum width, especially if the file is that shaped, in which case if the maximum width is that, the maximum height, it's gone off the screen, the maximum height is going to be that. So that's something always to be aware of. And again, if you find that your files are loading slowly, check what size of images it's producing. And if they're too big, then either move from PNG to JPEG, which is a more efficient format, though you can't then have transparency. Or actually say, we're going to reduce the maximum width of those images. We're not really aiming at people on 4K TVs. We just want to work with the regular web user crowd.
Okay, I know you covered this in the last session, but we have had several people ask about linking to pages, and does Quark hyperlink work in Flex?
Yes, it does. Let me just get last times up. Here we are. Okay, so here is last time's website. I'm afraid this is going to be again a bit small, but if I click on here, I'm clicking on the word band here, and I'm going to go to, just going to close all those things so we'll get everything off the screen. And we're now going to go to Windows Hyperlinks. And you just create the hyperlinks in exactly the same way that you create them in a regular document, except that you now have the option of some. If you can't see it, I'm doing new anchor, anchor name, yeah, cool. And I don't want an anchor. I want to actually an anchor will take you down the page. If I want a new page, why am I not getting that? Okay, because it's already got a hyperlink on. Sorry, that's why it's not doing that. Okay, let's go to one which hasn't got a hyperlink. So a new hyperlink, and it offers me URL, page, or anchor. URL takes you to any other website. Page takes you to a page on your website using the page function, as in regular pages, and anchor takes you to a particular place on that page. Works exactly the same way. But if you want something more advanced, for example, a rollover, so the hyperlinks are use whatever your browser thinks is the correct way of showing a hyperlink. If you want to do a more advanced one, like a button, which is what we've done here, you go to HTML5 and you add button. And let me just get that out of the way. Just preview that. HTML5 page preview. When you do page preview, the links will not work because it's a single page. So you need to preview the entire site. But as you can see here, that button's changing color, whereas these links on my browser, it just goes to a hand for that. So if you want it to actually have a button, you do that with the HTML5 buttons function. But for just hyperlinks, just anything, any regular hyperlink works. Again, for a menu, you might want to do buttons. Menus often are like that. The websites are getting less fussy. The days when everything had to be moving all the time are, I think, thankfully gone.
Okay, great. So a couple of last questions, but let me just again remind folks that this webinar recording will be available. The separate tutorial video will be available. Again, you can find that if you go to quark.com, look for the YouTube channel. That link is at the bottom of the website. Last week's blog, if you go to the blog under the About section, you will also be able to find a recap of last week. And we are going to email everyone tomorrow with links to today's webinar and tutorial. So you should be able to see this again and to catch up on last week's. And then again, remember June 2nd is our final Flexing Your Web Muscles session. And that's going to be on using QuarkXPress to help build enterprise websites. So last question here in our last minute, can QuarkXPress convert print? Sorry, wait, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Can I export a Quark HTML document as an MP4?
Only by using the screen recording functions of your computer. So if you do an animated website like the one I just showed you, let's go back there. Yeah, let's go to this one. So we will go to that and we're going to export that as a preview. It's always much more fiddly on a demo. So we're now exporting the publication as a preview. Oh, sorry, I'm exporting it. I wanted to preview it. Don't worry, it'll come back. Okay, so here's my animation, and you can see that spaceship is gradually rotating because it's out of control. You're going to see the text come up on the screen and then fade away, make them work harder. And I could just take QuickTime and on a Mac, QuickTime Player isn't just a player, I can do new screen recording, and I can then specify I select a portion of the screen, and it will then record that as an MP4. But HTML5 and MP4 are fundamentally different technologies. So what it's literally doing is it's looking at your website you've made and recording that. Now, if that's what you need to do, for some reason, you grew great animation in QuarkXPress, but then your boss says, "Oh, I've got to have it in my PowerPoint. How can I have that?" Well, the only way to get it from you can either look at the HTML5 through a browser in PowerPoint. I think you can do that. I'm not quite sure, but that's always dangerous using a browser in a live presentation. Or you can just record the screen like this. You press record, and it starts recording. And after a while, you then press the button at the top of the screen, and it then says, "Look at this. Here's your little video." After a while, you then press. Oh, that's recording me as well. So there isn't a direct way of doing it, but it's definitely possible.
Okay. So I think that is going to be it for today's session. Again, thanks to everyone for joining. Please register for the next session on June 2nd. That is on our website under events, under about, and also, of course, we'll be sending emails, and the Quark Spark newsletter will be going out next week with more information. Thanks again to everybody. If you need anything, of course, you can always go to quark.com and chat. We appreciate you and have a great day.
Thank you very much.